Shut up and sit down.
Hello again, gang, and welcome to part 2 of the Revell 124 Huey build. And we're going to be doing a bit of figure surgery, making of the door frames and lining the roof. So I've got the figures in the chair, and as you can see I'm going to be looking at the arms because I've got the joystick to go in. So his right arm I'm going to be looking at cutting at the elbow, and then I'll super glue that in place, add a bit of sprue goo. And what I tend to do when I add the sprue goo is I give the assembly a little shake and turn it upside down, and it just lets the sprue glue spread around and find its own level. So we'll just chop his arm off. So yeah, and then we'll get a bit of the old industrial strength super glue, and I'll probably glue this to the actual joystick and then try and line it up. We'll see how it goes together. But yeah, excuse my scuzzy remnants of super glue. I will be using a new tube shortly, so we'll just drop the joystick into the palm of his hand just to get a rough idea of where we want it to go, and then before it bonds I'll do a quick test fit and see how it's looking. So I'll just get me pliers and just roughly get it in place, and then I can twist and turn the arm to where I want it. And yeah, it's a quick way of getting his arm in place, and if you look at the geezer next to him, he's pretty much ready to go. So yeah, so we can get the old tweezers out and we'll get this bad boy in place, and then we can start sort of reconstructing the creases in his elbow of his pilot suit, just to try and get the cut section of arm to blend back into the original piece. Bearing in mind you've got the roof to go on, the windows to go on and everything, you're not really going to see it, but yeah, you kind of want to make it as near as perfect as you can. So we'll get that roughly where we want it, which is near enough there. So I can eyeball that and get a bit of super glue in and just let that sit, and then I'll drop a bit of super glue in his elbow, and then whilst it's drying quickly drop a bit of sprue goo into the mix, and it'll all sort of mix up a bit and strengthen it up a bit. So that's getting there. Reasonably happy with the placement. This is where now I knock it flying, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, so we'll speed up and get the super glue and that going, and as you can see I'll give the whole cockpit assembly a bit of a turn upside down and a twist here and a shake there, and just spreads the mix about, lets it find its own level, and then we'll grab the sprue goo and then we'll start glooping that on. And yeah, as you can see I just turn it upside down and it runs around all the little nooks and crannies and that, and then you can go in and start putting the material creases in where you want them, and just start padding out the elbow itself to get that shape back. As you can see, just a couple of drops and it's just caught that little area of the elbow there, and we can thicken it up a little bit and just turn it around, and it's running into the actual join now. and forming its own little ridges and its own creases, so it saves muggins here time having to do it. Happy days, thumbs up. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So we'll have a quick organise and then get on to a bit more sprugo around the pilot figures, start filling out where they join the seat and shaping it all, and then we'll put that bit to one side and let it dry. So yeah, I've got to do a bit more sprugo filling on his arm in a minute, so we'll have a bit of a tidy up and yeah, get that out the way and start lining the roof. Now this gnarly scuzzy old bit of tea towel is what I'm going to be using to line the roof caging, as you can see from the first episode. So I'm going to probably break it apart and do some strips along the sides and start putting them in so we can get the bit of tea towel roughly cut to shape, and then I'll run the scissors along the edge about 5mm from the actual finished edge, and then I shall go over the entire frame with the super glue, stretch the fabric where I need to, and then run the cocktail stick along the back of it to create the sag in the material between the beams, and then let it dry, and then I'll go round it then with the sanding stick, as you can see, and where I left it a little long on the edges I can then sand it against the plastic, and it actually cuts the tea towel, so it really gets it as close to the shape that you're putting it on as possible, so it saves a lot of time. So we're at that stage where we just don't worry about the colour of the tea towel or anything like that, because it's got to be painted yet. But we just quickly nip it around so it sits a little proud of its finished edge, like so. And as you can see, it's got a bit of sag. Again, get the UMP sanding stick out, nice and coarse, straight over the edge, and it just rubs the tea towel against the edge of the plastic, and it just gives you a nice little cut line. And then when I paint this, I can then go along with a bit of glue before I can, a bit of the old Contactor Professional, and where the edge of the material is, I'll just run a little bead along it. I then let that dry, sand it, and it gives it almost like a plasticky gluey edge on it. So yeah, so that's the side bits lined, and the same process again with the roof there. Cut out a reasonably large area, because the reason I go about 5mm all round is because I'm going to be putting sag in the material, so you'll want a little bit extra around the edges to compensate for that. So 5 or 10mm should do it, depends on how wide the area is you're covering. But you'll know, you'll start forming the sag, and you'll go, yeah, I'm glad I left a bit around the edges. So again, liberal amounts of super glue over the edges of the frame, because the material will absorb the glue. So yeah, and try not to stick yourself to it as well, like I'm about to. So yeah, festering super glue alert yet again. So we can pop some of that on there like that, rest the piece on the tea towel, and start pressing around and forming the shape I'm after. So we'll have a bit of that and just carry on round the edges with the sander, getting the shape that I want, putting a little bit of a bevel on the edge as well, and then the contactor professional glue will sit on that and bond it to the plastic, so you'll end up with a nice transition, because the door of the copter is going to be open and you're going to see this leading edge of the framework, so I want to try and get it as near as damn it, but as you can see it's taking shape quite nicely now, which for a gnarly old bit of tea towel that was going to go in the bin, it's put it to good use, isn't it? See, Festa's recycling. Yeah, but once this is given the edge that I'm happy with, I'll probably go over and prime the material just to stiffen it up a little bit. So I'll do that with a brush so that I can get into all of the nooks and crannies and pores of the fabric, but I'm beginning to get the sag that I like, so I'll get me bottle of primer and give that a wee shakeroon, and I think I'll get some primer on that whilst I think about it. So I'll just grab that and yeah, we'll have a little look at that, because as you can see where my thumb is, it's gonna look quite effective. So let's get me pot of primer and a chisel brush, and I think I'll give that a quick lick of primer. So we'll get that done. Yeah, I make these noises when I'm shaking my primer. Just pour a little bit of it in the lid, and I'll use that as a wee paint pot. And as you can see, I'm just going to use the edge of my brush just to get in the little edges of the plastic and get some primer on the fabric. Work my way around the edges of it. Note to self, try not to keep going off shot, Cole. Yeah, sorry viewers. So I'm just literally gonna drop them bits and pieces over so that they can dry once the primer's on. A little bit more in the lid there, and I'm slapping it on.
Slap it on.
So we can get it in there and done and dusted. And literally just carry on round, feather the edges with the primer, like so. Rest that over the back, and then we can get on and just prime the top of this roof lining. Don't worry too much about even coats, because it's going to be worn material in places and new material in others where they may have patched the lining. So I'm just literally getting coverage just to stiffen up the fabric so that when I'm moving it about it doesn't sort of tear or anything like that. So loads and loads and loads of primer, just getting it in there like so. I'll bung the lid back on in a minute. Let's give that another quick coat, and just keep slapping it in the areas that I need to go and get coverage on. Apologies for coming off shot there, it's just so that I can see what I'm doing, but as you can see that's had a good larrapin of primer. So we'll let that dry, shove the paint out of the way and clean me brush, and then we can bring in the fuselage and start looking at doing a bit of door frame, I think, whilst that starts to dry. So we'll just shovel me tea towel and that out of the way, give everything a quick clean, and then we'll start with the fuselage, I reckon. Yeah, why not? Gets it done, doesn't it? Right. I'll just show you with me pointer we have got one half of it that's got the door frame in it that the doors are going to close against, and the engine covers are going to close against. If you remember, I cut them out. Well, I've used styrene strip on one half to make what is going to be known as the door shuts. So we'll show you on the second half how I go about it, and I'll also show you how I put the mesh in the side of the engine cowlings. So we'll grab the other half of the copter, move the completed side out of the way, and I just use offcuts of styrene sheet that are really flimsy. I can't remember the size, 0.1, 0.2, and I cut tiny little strips out of it. No particular length, just little strips. And what I do then is I glue and clamp these to form the contours of the helicopter fuselage, and it creates the door shut. So a little bit of Festa fin in there, get the first bit in place and put a crocodile clip on it, and that will then let me start conforming everything else to the shape that I want. And as the glue welds it to it and warms it up, it lets it conform, so you end up with a nice little 2-3 mil wide door shut all the way around the area where you cut the door out of. And what you can do with that is, where you have a panel gap that may be a bit bigger because of the thickness of the saw blade, you can then go around with a bit of putty or filler and build it back up against that door shut to reduce the panel gap a bit. So I'll look out for that later on. I'll go through what I'm doing on that stage, but for the moment we'll get the rest of the framework put in. And it's quite a quick process on this, because as you all know, the extra fin does dry really quickly, so it don't take long to knock these little frames out. And then I leave it for a couple of days just to dry up with the clamps on, and yeah, we can carry on with other bits of the copter build then, like making the hinges and things like that. So that's what we're going to be doing. So we'll carry on around the edges of this and get this bit done. Come round the door frame, do the longer lengths first, so I'll do the back length of the door and clamp that in place and start that off, and that will then form quite nicely. And what you've got to be careful of as well is where you're gluing the interior against this. You don't want to go too wide with your door shuts, because you've got surfaces that are going to mate up to this, so you might end up having to run over them surfaces with a sanding stick just to knock them back the thickness of this material. But once this all gets joined before it gets painted, it will be matched up, and any exposed gaps will be sprue glued or filled so that it becomes one continuous, almost seamless join. So that's the theory anyway. So we'll carry on reinforcing this and start getting a bit of structure back into the copter. Now, you might be worried with the flexibility of this tail section, but bear in mind, once the cockpit goes in, all the levels of the floor and the flooring that the engine sits on, they'll all be glued inside the fuselage, so it'll give it back some stability and strength. So we'll carry on with that, get that in place. And it leads me to notice that I can't remember seeing the two fins that go on the back, where that slot is in the back of the tail section. I'll have a look in my box, but I've got a feeling I might have to scratch build something there. I can't remember seeing them. So I might have to tap my mate Davey up to get me to send one of his spare ones so that I can have a template, and I'll sit and scratch that because I've got a rivet maker. So yeah, I just need to count them first. Anyway, yeah. So we'll carry on with that. Come round the top edge there and clamp that. And this is quite a tight bend here, so I'm going to clamp it beforehand, and then I'm going to put loads and loads and loads of extra fin in there, just so that that can really sort of weld that to it. And it's coming along really nicely, considering this was primed with quite a scabby primer really. It stripped off quite nicely, so yeah. So I'll just quickly go around and dab any bits and bobs that haven't taken and see what we're left with. And then do the bottom edge of where the pilot's door is. And then we've got to come down the edge of the windscreen where that little A-post pillar is. Now I'm going to go a bit wider than the pillar with the door frame. And then once I've got it glued, I can then run a knife or a scalpel blade along it and trim it back, because obviously you've got the windscreen to go in against that pillar, so I want to try to feather that edge and thin it down as much as possible so that I don't end up with a massive gap round the windscreen. But bear in mind, this is the Revell Huey, and one of the bugbears is the glass panels don't fit very well, so it could be a blessing in disguise. We'll soon let you know when I get to that stage. If you hear sobbing noises coming from the microphone, then you know that it didn't work out according to plan and I'm spitting me dummy out. So yeah. So we're gonna carry on with this, and we've only got then that leading edge by the look of it to come round. Yeah. So I might end up making little dummy frames around all the windows so that I get a better fit for the clear panels. I'll dry fit a couple of them first, but if I remember rightly, they did have a tendency to pop out, and if that's the case, I'll possibly make up more of this styrene strip and just frame everything with it and be done with it. So I'll have a look, I'll have a test dry fit, and if I'm unhappy, then I'll make the frames and I'll film that and show you how I do it again, just to give you an idea. And it works for any model that you've got where you've got a clear panel that doesn't fit properly. You can use this process to build a little ridge for the clear panel to sit on, and then you can disguise it as a windscreen surround with a bit of rubber black. So Festa's fun tips, eh? Get in there. So that's that frame pretty much done on there, so I'll just quickly go around and check it. I'm reasonably happy with that, so I'm going to leave them clamps on that A-post because I've got a lot of glue on there, because that's the edge that's going to get feathered in where the windscreen goes. But as you can see, that's pretty damn sexy. So we'll drill out this canopy cover for the turbine. So I'm going to drill out the moulded panel that Revell have put in with a texture on, and I'm going to replace it with a mesh just so that you can see through it. So it just gives it a little bit more of I don't know, it just gives it a bit of a better feel. So I've got a load of the mesh. So the mesh I use, probably not to scale, but hey, Since when have I cared about scale? I use the filler mesh that you get from Alfred's for car bodywork. You can use photo etch mesh, you can use any type of mesh basically. You can get scale stuff, but it's to hand, it looks like mesh, and as far as I'm concerned it fits. So yeah, once it's had a coat of paint, who cares? But it just gives it an area that you can see through basically, and you can see the engine behind it, and then you can open the panels and have a little looky-loo, and yeah. So I'm literally just running through my my drill, giving that a bit of a persuasion, because it's thick plastic, this stuff. Quite an old moulding, but by drilling the holes I can then get in the tip of me hooked photo etch saw, and I can quickly saw along the edges and tidy it up, and then drop a bit of the mesh in, and that'll make that look a little bit more authentic. So we'll just carefully go around them edges and saw between each hole, and then I've got me files on the left there. I can go round and just clean it up, nip out the excess with me nippers, and quickly trim along that curve. And like I say, we can do a bit of fettling then and get the finer detail done on them pieces. I'll just put the covers on there so that I don't cut myself. And yeah, Captain Stabity alert. Yeah, Fester's got a scalpel in his hand. What possibly can go wrong here? Answers on a postcard too. Helgum35 at GeoCities. Yeah. So we'll quickly inspect what we've got. Yeah, it's a bit ropey, so trim out as much of it as I can, and then that'll only leave me a minimal amount then just to go over with the file. So we can get that trimmed up, and it's actually coming along quite well. It surprised me actually how quick this little kit is coming together. We've got another live show coming up at the time of recording this. We're, I think, 12 days away from the live show, 11 or 12 days. Saturday the 30th of November 2019 is the live show. If you're watching this after then, obviously the show's gone ahead, but you'll be able to find a video of it in the live show videos on the channel there, if you want to watch the full length video and keep up with us. But I'll use that to cobble together some more episodes on this one. But quickly just nip round with me file, smooth that out, and then we can quickly go over it with the sanding stick. And I've got a bit of mesh and some super glue, so I'll just go around the edge with that, and then I can put me mesh piece in, press that into place, and then I'll put that to one side and let it dry, probably overnight actually. Just press down on it with a scalpel blade to ooze the glue through the mesh so that it joins all the surfaces, pulls it into it, and I'll put that with the other one, and that's a pair of them canopy covers made then. And then we can move on to the next little bits and bobs that we're going to do on the Huey now, whilst that's drying. and I'll just grab me bits and bobs out of the way. Yeah, that's James's extra fin holder as promised, mate. Bless you. Congratulations on winning that on the Huey episode. So I'll drop them clamps off because it's dried out. And it's looking pretty damn rosy. See, so I can just run my knife along the edge of the seam to clean it up a little bit against where the windscreen's going to sit. As you can see, it's quite a bit to trim off. But I'm trimming it back purposefully because if I do end up making a weave frame, I can then attach the frame to that white styrene. So when I dry fit the glass work for the copter, which I will do, I can then, if I need to make me frames, film that for you. And then when it comes to painting, I can paint it all and drop me glass in from the outside. Probably work a bit better actually. So yeah, I like the sound of that. So I'll just quickly put a bit of glue in the bottom there just to pop that back in. Any areas that may have come away where the glue didn't quite bite, I can go over and just start clamping everything so that I'm happy with it. Like I say, the mesh panels seem to have worked, so that's a thumbs up for them. I'm happy with those. So have a quick look, see what else we can do on this for this episode. So grab the dashboard, start measuring that up because I'm going to be doing a 3D print of the dash. So I'll show you how I do that on the CAD software. But this is just a decal that I printed out and glued to a bit of styrene just to get the shape of the dashboard. I'll cut that out and then I'll use that to make a 3D printable raised image. So I'll show you how I do that on part 3 of this. So it'll be the next episode. I'll go into that and that'll give you an idea on how I'm doing the dash. But for the moment I'll just drop the clamps off of that. That's a thumbs up because I'm happy. Probably now might make up the seat to go on the back there. It's basically a Revell strip of plastic and I've put one styrene tube in underneath. I'm going to put another one along the front there, and then I'm going to drop my old faithful tea towel over all of that moulded rubbish and create a textured, almost like a canvas, khaki canvas seat, olive drab even, and I'm just going to wrap it around the tube, use a bit of super glue just to stiffen it all up and press that into place, and when the figures are sat on it, it'll look like a piece of material, because it is. But I'm also going to have a bit of wear on an area, that sort of thing, and a bit of fraying, and yeah. But it's just a way of trying to make it look a little more realistic. You're only trying to fool the eye or trick the eye into seeing something that may or may not be there, and it like I say, if anyone's looking at it, just lets them think, oh actually, yeah, you know, looks like material. Oh, it is material. Yeah. So little quick tidy up of said piece, and then we can look at putting it on the styrene tube and then gluing it to the beautifully moulded quality bit of plastic that Revell put in there. And I noticed as well the uprights, you know, I'm going to cut little tubes and create the brace bars and things like that, just to try and put a little bit more detail back in it. because having done some research photos, I have come across some pictures where, like you say, you got the tube, you got the seats, you got brace bars and different bits and pieces that were thrown in these Hueys in the field. And Dave, who's doing these ones, doing it as the original Medivac copter that they were shipped out to be. So a lot of what I've got in mine, he's had his saw out and has cut it all out because he's going down a different avenue with his one. Which is an interesting build, by the way. You know, have a quick peek on his channel, Model Maker Dave's Workshop, and you'll see that he's doing his one as the Medivac, and he's joining me on the live show. So more mayhem will ensue. But like I say, we'll pop this bit of material in the seat and glue that in, and we can get that in place, and then it can dry, and it'll have the same treatment then as what the headlining had with the primer to stiffen the material up. But for the moment it's just going to quickly be bonded to that sheet of plastic, and hopefully it will create a little bit better effect. Excuse me. And like I say, once the figures are sat on it, yeah, it'll just look a little bit more seat-like, I suppose. But yeah, I know what I'm trying to create in my little world. There's this perfect Huey seat that I've built, and yeah, as you can imagine, in the real world it's probably not quite the same, but it's glued in. I'll just press along the back edge there with a scalpel blade and get that in place like so. And yeah, I'm quite chuffed with that. It's coming along quite nicely. I'll just nip me brace bars to go up where the front of the seat is. There's a little angle tube that comes up, and again, this was all from the photos I've downloaded, so I'm going to put them in. And like I say, once this is all coated with the aluminium buffable, it'll all start blending in. It's a bit of a mix and mash of colours at the moment because of the different sprue part colours on the Huey plus 3D printed, and at this stage it always looks a bit of a harlequin concoction of plastic, but once you get a couple of coats of primer on it and everything goes the same colour, you're like, yeah, actually it's coming together now. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it's coming along, to be honest with you. So I'll get the old tweezers on that, put the last brace bar in, I think. Probably call it that then, and let this all dry off, and then I can come back and do the dashboard and some more detail work in the next episode, I reckon. So just quickly give that a dab. But like I say, in the meantime, thanks for watching me inane drivel. These are cobbled together, these ones, so it's not quite the normal build series stuff, but it's just footage that I've had where I've been filming with different cameras and that, and doing the live show and that, and yeah, but that's just a quick idea of what we've got. So I'll wrap up there. Thanks for watching, and join me for episode number 3 when we get this dashboard done.